Hello everybody, Andy here again. Well, this is a video response to Anakin 1814's video called The Ties That Bind Us, and he was asking people those sort of things that you can connect with people outside of YouTube, in the real world, so to speak. YouTube sort of inevitably sort of creeps up in our lives nowadays, but he wanted to know those sort of hobbies and things like that that sort of connect us, so we can strike up conversations with people in the real world, in our normal day-to-day life. Well, most of my sort of hobbies and interests range around the sort of music. As anybody who's watched my videos in the past will know, I'm a very big music fan. Music's been a big thing right the way throughout my life, more or less from as long as I can remember. I can remember sort of watching the Beatles on TV over here in the UK, and I distinctly remember it because of my father saying, look at those guys with the long hair and all this, and I thought, yes, this is rebellious, I like this sort of stuff. So that sort of got me interested, and I used to play drums in bands and all this sort of stuff years and years ago, and I'm going back sort of 20 odd years now. But some music sort of stayed as a constant throughout my life, and I sort of it's been a hobby, a passion of mine for a long time, obviously. And others of you may know that I've done a bit of DJing on the radio, and sort of a chairman of a local radio station which only comes on sort of once a year. Currently thinking about maybe broadcasting again next May, so that sort of thing takes your time. I'm the chairman of the station, so you've got all those little things. So music's a constant that comes right the way through. Gary mentioned some other things like photography. Photography is something that's always interested me as well, actually. Once again, I put up photography videos that people might have seen from trips that I've done before, which leads on to another thing, travel and that type of thing as well. When I was younger, I did actually do a reasonable amount of travelling. Sort of went to India and Sri Lanka, and been to Egypt a couple of times, and throughout Europe, and obviously I've been over to the USA a couple of times. And I've always had a real sort of passion and an interest in travel. I haven't been able to do anywhere near as much as I'd like to, for lots of reasons, money being one of them. But hopefully when I maybe get a bit older and retire and that sort of thing, I'll have a bit more free time as well, which is something else. You know, we've all got families, we've all got commitments and things like that, haven't we, that sort of tie us to certain things. You try and do as much as you can with them, but it does limit you to an extent. They don't want to go trekking through the Grand Canyon like I might want to. So travel's been there, and I like reading about travelling, which is another thing, reading and books. I was never a reader when I was a kid, actually. When I was a youngster, and even when I was at school, books, I say bored me, but I just couldn't get into them. Maybe I was too busy doing other things, as kids you do, don't you? You're out in the street, you're out playing with your mates and all this sort of stuff. The last thing I wanted to be doing was stuck in the room reading a book, whereas after I left school, I started getting into that. Maybe I changed, I don't know, probably all change when we start work, I imagine. But something I've always sort of said to people is that I think I've learned far more since I left school than I actually learned at school. That's nothing against the type of schooling that I had. It's just that my interests have grown and grown and grown. And I've wrote down a list of things to actually talk about here, but my interests sort of range far and wide, right across the spectrum. So I suppose in some way I'm quite lucky that I can speak to lots of different people about lots of different things. And maybe not as an expert in any of them. It's a jack of all trades and a master of none is one of those expressions that they say over here. But my interests, as I said, I love science, I love history, geography, as I said, travel, photography, film, books, you know, TV to an extent as well. One interest I have got through TV, sort of favourite TV programmes, just about my favourite TV programme of all time would be Northern Exposure, an American TV programme. Coming from a Brit, that's probably a bit of a surprise for most of you, but it's one of those programmes that I got into when I first started watching it, when it was first being run in the sort of early 90s, and it struck a chord with me, partly the sort of community. And you know, here we go, maybe this is something that we can think about with the YouTube thing as well. Sorry, I mentioned it, Gary, I didn't mean to. But the characters in that community, obviously it's a fictional community, but I just loved the way they built up the characters, and I got involved with the characters, especially the character of Chris in the Morning, the DJ. I've forgotten the name, John Corbett, that's it, who's now gone on to bigger and better things. But his character is one of those sort of characters that inspired me. He was a DJ on the local radio station, used to do a breakfast show, but he seemed to be on at all times of the day, and he used to talk about loads and loads of different things. He used to sort of philosophise when he talked, and he used to have a great interest, and maybe that's where I get some of my inspiration from. Maybe I should be I'm an Andy in the morning, afternoon, evening, depending on what it is. And that has always inspired me on, and I do love watching that, so that's something I get ideas from. I've never actually met anybody in real life who has that sort of interest in that particular program. Not very well known program over here. Another one of those things that people can't understand. Why do you like that? But local affairs and local interest and walking and all that sort of thing. You might have watched my scenic walk videos. I love getting out in the countryside when I can. Love doing a bit of walking, and now I've sort of converted that with a bit of history involved, and now I take the video camera. I did actually used to do this with a mate of mine for a local radio station. He was a sort of a presenter on there, and we used to go out and do a lot of these walks that I used to scenic walks, and I used to sort of dig up all the history, and we used to sort of do a bit of banter on the radio for that sort of thing. So that's how all that came about. So lots of different things. I won't go on and on and on, but loads of different hobbies, loads of different interests, just about anything. I think sport is another one. I was trying to think anything else. Obviously work, current affairs, political type of things. I'm not a great politician. I don't like to get involved too much because I'm rather disillusioned by it all, but there is interest in it, and there are always things out there that sort of grab your interest and make you mad at times, don't they? We all have our opinions on different things, and that's the thing that someone else said about YouTube here. We're talking, we're listening to people right across the world, getting all that information from different people, hearing loads and loads of different points of view from different countries, and we're learning a bit about those countries as well. We're seeing a bit of those countries as well. So YouTube is another thing that we can talk about now. In certain company, it's still, you know, still the minority of people, but that's another thing that YouTube, go to a YouTube gathering and there's that instant connection straight away, isn't there? But they're mine, say mainly around the music side of things, but lots of other things as well. So anyway, nice video. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. It'll be a little link down there somewhere. And if you don't know who Gary is, Anakin1814, why aren't you subscribed to him? You should be. Anyway, thanks for your time. I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.